innocent people suffer the consequences. So I think we have seen how the Gulf War has come out. Some people think it's a victory. But I think when we analyze the situation there, what sort of victory was there as far as the country? Yes, Kuwait was liberated, but the consequences that we have seen has created even a greater danger for the entire world. So I think now is the time for the leadership, for the political leaders, both in America, in the European Union, to look into the whole situation with greater sensibility and not rush into taking decisions which we would then regret at the end.
For the average person, though, who may not understand the intricacies and the diversive nature of Islam, would you say that it is really a matter of perception here? And you touched on that a little earlier. Is there that confusion between religion and terrorism, and is that hazy?
I think there is. Sometimes one wonders whether it's a deliberate attempt on certain parties and certain groups to impose an agenda on the world community, that the Muslim community are by and large involved in terrorist activities, and this community perhaps condones terrorism. They cannot be further from the truth. Islam's position is very, very clear. The Holy Quran makes it very clear that the loss of one innocent life is equivalent to the loss of entire humanity. Now, there cannot be a more powerful statement than this. And yet, the notion which is coming into the minds of the ordinary Muslim community is that the Muslim blood is cheap. That has to be demolished. There has to be fairness in pursuing with our foreign policy. When we are referring to the UN resolutions, when we are referring to the law of international legality, it must be balanced. America must come out very clearly now that it has to look into its whole entire foreign policy in a very objective manner. And I hope Britain, European Union, will also look into that basis. Here, Britain has to act as a calming force in this situation. And once we analyze the situation further, it will make sense to us that we do not need to compound the situation, and the notion in the eyes of the Muslim community and the overall community that there is not a war between the West and Islam. It's a war between people who respect civilized values and these criminal activities, who perform the criminal activities. And this includes the narcotic gangs, the mafia gangs, the white supremacists in America who are involved in the Oklahoma bombing. These are various groups that sadly we seem to be not giving much thought to it and concentrating on perhaps one group that may be involved.
Iqbal Sakrani of the Muslim Council of Britain, thanks a lot for your time. Jonathan?
Pakistan is one of only 3 countries in the world that recognize Afghanistan's Taliban rulers. The U.S. is waiting on Islamabad's response to several specific requests aimed at Osama bin Laden. Among the requests are access to Pakistani intelligence on bin Laden and the Taliban, for Pakistan to close its border with Afghanistan. The U.S. also asks that Pakistan stop supplying fuel to the Taliban and grant warplanes access to its Pakistani airspace if asked. And top U.S. officials say they've made one more request, that Pakistani and moderate Arab states prevent wealthy benefactors from sending money to Osama bin Laden. Friday, Pakistan said it would cooperate fully with the U.S., but officials in Washington say that level of cooperation remains to be seen. With more from Islamabad, we're joined now by political analyst Talat Hussain. There is now a meeting of the National Security Council, I gather, and the Pakistani cabinet. They are going to make some important decisions. What do you think we're likely to hear?
Well, what we are likely to hear is that there is complete unanimity in the ranks of the government. That will be the official line on whatever stand Musharraf has already taken. That is to provide full support to the plan of the Bush administration to have retaliatory strikes whenever they deem fit. We are not yet sure what is going to be the specific detail of the Pakistani response. Of course, this remains a matter of high security involving not just the core of the Pakistani establishment, but also the core planners in White House, in the Pentagon, in the State Department. So, but there is no doubt that the Pakistani establishment over the past 2 days has been able to drive themselves towards a consensus point where they want to actually come across as a reasonable country, staying along with the rest of the civilization of the world and helping the U.S. fight terrorism.
General Pervez Musharraf, Pakistan's leader, is a military dictator. Why does he need consensus? Is his government too weak to simply make this decision on its own?
It's not that his government is too weak to make this decision. In fact, he is a political almighty. His power flows from the barrel of the gun, and on top of it, he has got 6 portfolios under his belt. He commands the armed forces of the country. He's the president, he's the chief executive, he's the defense minister, he's also the head of the National Security Council, and so on and so forth. It is just that the scale of the tragedy inside the U.S. and the scale of the response from the U.S. is so massive that even a powerful ruler like Musharraf cannot take a decision on his own. And also, this is the implications of whatever options that he may exercise are not going to touch just his government. It is also going to touch the social fabric of Pakistan. It is also going to touch the relationship between the liberal sections of the society as well as the religious sections of the society. It will also impact the future political plans that he has in mind. So it is not just the decision of one man, it is actually a decision that is going to impact the lives of all the Pakistanis and also the entire region. That is why I guess there's a lot of consultation going on. This is not a one man's decision because the stakes are a bit too high.
Implicit in what the administration is asking or demanding of Pakistan is this, that Pakistan is part of the problem up till now and now has to become part of the solution, that Pakistani money and fuel and cooperation are helping the Taliban government, and that Pakistan has a great deal of intelligence that it could be sharing and has not up till now. Is that premise right? Is Pakistan essentially cooperating with the Taliban and cooperating, in a sense, with Osama bin Laden in the past months, in the past years?
I think it will be illogical to say that Pakistan is not playing any role in dealing with the Taliban. Of course, Pakistan has been playing a role, and there is a military side to this role, but there's also the diplomatic and the political side to this role. After all, whenever the messages needed to be conveyed to the Taliban, for instance, issues relating to the UN and issues of closing down the terrorist camps allegedly run by Osama bin Laden, Pakistan was used as a conduit. But at the same time, I think over the years, the Pakistani establishment has made a clear-cut distinction between supporting and backing the Taliban against the backing that the Northern Alliance has been getting from other countries, and backing Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden may have become, for various reasons, a popular figure with some sections of the Pakistani society, but he is not the main concern that the Pakistani establishment has inside Afghanistan. If anything, Osama bin Laden, over the years, because of his very poor record with Washington and the activities that he's allegedly involved in, has become an albatross around Pakistan's neck. The entire world comes knocking on Pakistan's door and makes demands on it vis-a-vis Osama bin Laden, demands that Pakistan over the years has discovered it cannot fulfill. So Osama bin Laden is as much a problem for Pakistan as he has become for the world as well.
Political analyst Talat Hussain, thanks very much for talking with us. Hussain?
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, flags flying from every window, donors in long lines at the blood banks. Americans rally to show their support and to respond in any way they can. But how do you respond to an outrage like this? Jeff Greenfield takes a look at the nature of America's resolve.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
from the moment Franklin Roosevelt declared war, American men rushed to enlist. And the home front swung into action as well. Women and children collected rubber. Civilians gave blood, scrap metal.
And you have wisely loaned money to your...
They bought bonds to fund the war. They painted their windows to foil an enemy air attack. And they rationed everything from food to gasoline, all in pursuit of the unconditional surrender of clearly defined enemies.
Okay, it's an A card, 3 gallons.
There was also a less noble side to our response. Japanese Americans were interned in camps.
Some among them were potentially dangerous.
They were targeted for abuse. In the first days after Pearl Harbor, major magazines aired features like this one, How to Tell Your Friends from the Japs. 45 years after World War II, the Gulf War brought a different kind of response. No draft, no home front discomfort, but a broad national show of support. And we knew what to do after the Oklahoma City bombing. The national mourning, the shared grief, exactly the right responses to a single spasmodic act of madness.
America is not alone in mourning its dead. All around the world, people have gathered for vigils and memorials for the victims. For more, we go to Liz George in London. Liz?
Thank you, John. The NATO alliance is now facing up to its commitment to support the United States. The essence of its latest resolution, an attack against one is an attack against all. But joining in armed retaliation is a call some member states may be reluctant to take. Diana Muriel reports.
A time for respect and remembrance. The 19 ambassadors to NATO shoulder to shoulder, observing 3 minutes of silence at midday on Friday, along with millions of other Europeans. They stand in readiness following Wednesday's affirmation of Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, the first time a commitment has been given to a collective defence against an attack on an alliance member. Quite what that commitment will involve is less clear. Some alliance members, like Britain, have promised strong support for any NATO effort. Even Norway, reported to be less enthusiastic, says its commitment is firm.
Our resources are more limited, of course, than the United States resources, but we will certainly put military resources at the disposal of any operation that the alliance would decide. There should be no doubt about that. Special forces or whatever we could bring to bear on the situation.
The British and the French could also provide elite troops to any operation if required. But support from others, like the Netherlands, appears more muted.
We will be with you, mentally, morally, and possibly also in concrete terms. But what it will be at that stage, I can't answer today.
Former NATO chief Willy Claus believes some members of the NATO alliance would be unwilling to participate in direct military action, particularly if that involved attacks on countries that are shown to have harboured or supported the terrorists responsible for Tuesday's acts of terror.
It depends what countries and what could be the consequences of the military actions against those countries. Are we speaking about countries controlling nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, yes or no? It's a big difference, you know.
Until a terrorist target is identified, NATO allies are understood to be providing military intelligence to assist the United States in their investigation. As the 19 national flags of the NATO alliance fly at half-staff, the time for action could be approaching. The United States has yet to make specific demands for NATO assistance, but that is expected here in the coming days and weeks. Diana Muriel, CNN, at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
There were scenes of grief across the world on Friday and an unprecedented show of solidarity as people of all nations remembered Tuesday's victims. In Berlin, an emotional memorial ceremony at the Brandenburg Gate.
Sing grace, how sweet the sound.
And later, a march through the streets in a plea for peace. And in Jerusalem, a candlelit vigil at the gates of the ancient city that was attended by more than 100 Palestinian mourners. Around the world, a wave of anti-Americanism has been building in Arab communities for years. Observers say the US support for Israel is one of the main reasons why. Our chief international correspondent, Christiane Amanpour, has more.
These pictures of Palestinians celebrating the terrorist attack on the United States horrified all those who were in mourning. Palestinian leaders were quick to point out that these were only isolated incidents by what they called an ignorant few, and Chairman Yasser Arafat immediately condemned the attacks.
We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Later, Arafat was seen giving blood in a symbolic gesture of solidarity with America. Arab allies, the Iranian president, and even Libya have strongly condemned what happened, saying that it violates Islamic principles. But on the streets of all these countries, anti-Americanism has been building. Moderates are being eclipsed by extremists after almost a year of violence in the Middle East, the Palestinian Intifada in Israel. Experts in radical Islamic terrorism say masterminds like Osama bin Laden have cleverly manipulated a real sense of grievance into a willingness by some to become human instruments of mass murder.
Osama bin Laden has been in the Muslim world, has been capitalizing on very sensitive issues that mobilize the whole Arab and Muslim community. The liberation of Jerusalem, American troop presence in Saudi Arabia, of course the fate of the Iraqi people suffering under sanctions.
Experts say terrorism cells managed to operate in America's Arab allies such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia, as well as Europe and North America. Fearful of a backlash, mainstream Muslim leaders here in Europe are trying to explain that this war on American civilians is a crime that can never be justified as a religious duty.
The position of the Muslim community in the UK, as I'm sure in different parts of the world, is very clear. We condemn utterly and unequivocally the atrocities that has been committed. We believe that the people, the perpetrators of this heinous crime are outside the pale of civilization.
So now, British and other world leaders are calling for a global alliance to combat a global network of terrorism, to arrest them cell by cell, shut down their financial support, and make it more difficult to forge travel documents. There are no quick fixes, they say, just a long, sustained, and difficult campaign. Christiana Manpour, CNN, London.
And that's it from London. Back to you now, John.
Thanks, Liz. Let's take another look at some of the latest developments now. Search crews in western Pennsylvania have located the cockpit voice recorder in the wreckage of United Flight 93. Investigators say the recorder is in fairly good shape. It's designed to capture the last 30 minutes of cockpit conversation and could reveal whether passengers tried to regain control of the hijacked jetliner, as investigators believe.
Congress has taken quick action on a number of issues arising from Tuesday's attacks. It has approved a $40 billion spending measure. Congress also voted to give President Bush broad powers in any military action against the terrorists who attacked the U.S., their sponsors, and their supporters.
It has been nearly 4 days since the attacks, and around-the-clock rescue operations continue despite some rainy weather Friday. The forecast for today, fair skies. Air travel in the U.S. is gradually being restored, with many airliners operating limited flights Friday. Some flights took off from LaGuardia, one of the New York airports close to the scene of the attack on the World Trade Center. LaGuardia, along with the city's other two major airports, was shut down again Thursday, you'll recall, after the arrest of one man with false identification papers. Passengers going through airport security now face new security measures. They're finding that items they used to carry with them as they boarded their flights will no longer get past security checkpoints. And as Patty Davis reports, resumption of flights after Tuesday's events has proven anything but smooth.
Long lines at Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport on the airline's first full day of operations.
Today I got here at 6 o'clock and my flight is at 8:20. And I'm probably not going to make it.
Long lines at this United ticket office in Washington, D.C. as passengers try to change flights and get refunds.
We have people who have been out here for hours waiting to get in.
I waited 2 hours yesterday.
Well, today we have people waiting for hours.
The airlines are urging patience. Days after the deadly hijackings, a slow return to normal. Most airports open. 2,000 flights in the air by midday, 1/2 the normal air traffic. Instrument-rated pilots in private planes and overseas carriers now allowed to return to the skies. That's where these passengers hoped to be as they waited for their flights at LaGuardia Airport.
Now it seems that the FAA haven't given clearance for any planes to take off.
Eventually, New York's airports reopened, but Washington's Reagan National Airport remains closed due to its proximity to the Pentagon and other federal buildings. Logan Airport in Boston opening early Saturday. The airlines have been hit hard by the terrorist attacks, expecting $4 billion in losses this week alone.
I've talked to a number of airline executives in the last 24 hours, and I am convinced that they are seriously impaired.
Airlines welcoming a multi-billion-dollar bailout from Congress. But with the industry suffering from a slow economy, many wonder if it will be enough. Patty Davis, CNN, Washington.
It has been rainy and cold and dark at New York's Ground Zero, but rescue workers are continuing their efforts to reach and save anyone who may still be alive. Garrick Utley joins us now with an update on the effort. Garrick?
Jonathan, the work, as you say, is continuing. The sun will be coming up shortly, and of course the workers working 12-hour shifts will continue through the weekend, unfortunately for many, many weeks to come. We want to take just a moment and talk about something that is obvious to all of us who have been following this tragedy. That is the power of pictures. Never have they been as powerful, perhaps, as they have been this week. There are pictures that you don't have to see in order to see them. Just think for a moment. Mentioned in the past an event like Pearl Harbor, December 7th, and the picture erupts of smoke rising from those American naval vessels in the harbor there in Hawaii. Mentioned the raising of an American flag over Iwo Jima. You don't have to see it. It's there in our long-term memory, and it comes to our eyes, so to speak, immediately. What kind of images will September 11th leave? We can only begin to guess. There are so many of them. The importance of images and pictures. Here's Beth Nissen.
Iconic image to help a stunned world comprehend the human cost of Tuesday's attack. Most of the images are at remove, heavy machinery clawing at rubble, closed trucks carrying bodies to the morgue. Headlines and news reports are starting to number the dead, but most of those lost are still shrouded without a name or face.
You can say hundreds of people died, and if you see one image of one man holding one dead person, it's a different kind of information because it's more personal.
For so many, this one image personalized the human loss in New York this week. They looked at this picture and knew that there were thousands of souls like this one dark-haired man, thousands who went to work Tuesday morning and were dead just hours later. Many family members of those lost in other terrorist attacks say such graphic images are vitally important psychologically. One of those lost in the bombing of Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, was J.P. Flynn, the brother of Brian Flynn.
It does start to make it sink in when all of a sudden it becomes less this thing on TV and more about, oh my God, there's J.P. He is gone.
Many psychologists say vivid images of tragedies such as the Oklahoma City bombing can help people move past disbelief and toward grief. A grief that will slowly give way to acceptance, however painful it is, that allows them to go on with life, however altered it is. Yet researchers on traumatic stress caution that graphic images of death, especially those televised without warning, are not therapeutic for everyone.
They may be re-traumatized by an image. Information is a double-edged sword. How much information is too much information?
And as traumatic as the sight of a human corpse is, the sight of a dismembered one is immeasurably worse. One of the reasons there are so few pictures of individual victims at Ground Zero is that so few individual bodies are intact. Those working in the debris say the scene is a horror.
You bend down and you pull up a shoe, there's a foot inside. There might be an arm laying next to it. You know, I've never seen nothing like it. Never in my life. You know, only in the movies. And this is real life what I'm talking about.
The full picture of all that happened is still developing and may always be in thousands of pieces. Beth Nissen, CNN, New York.
And of course, we all know that a picture is worth 1,000 words, although the exact quote is that a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Often, many times more than 1,000 words, and never was that more true than this tragic week in New York. Jonathan, back to you.
Garrick, thanks very much. One known victim of Tuesday's horror was lawyer and CNN commentator Barbara Olson. She was aboard the flight that targeted the Pentagon. Her husband is U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson, and she managed to reach him twice by cell phone before the end. He says he got another bittersweet reminder of his wife later that night.
I left the home a little before 6, as I said, and Barbara left not long thereafter to catch the plane. And it was my birthday. And when I finally went to bed, it was after 1 o'clock. Now it was September 12th. There was a note that Barbara had written to me on the pillow, saying, "I love you. When you read this, I will be thinking of you, and I will be back Friday." It were a few more words than that, but I just that was extraordinarily special and very much like Barbara, and I'm grateful that she did that.
Barbara Olson was 45 years old.
We've heard the accounts of victims of Tuesday's attacks making phone calls to their loved ones, among them, as we just mentioned, Barbara Olson. Families, though, are reflecting on these treasured and tormenting final words. Thelma Gutierrez reports.
September 11th, American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower. Jill Gartenberg's husband is inside.
He called my office. I got to my office probably 2 minutes after he left his first message on my machine saying there was a fire in his building on his floor. He didn't know if he was going to make it.
18 minutes later, United Flight 175 slams into the South Tower. Lori Van Auken's husband, Kenneth, makes a final call home.
It was just horrible. It was really just horrible. I could hear the terror in his voice, and he was trying to sound like he was calm for us, but you could hear the chaos in the background and the terror in his voice.
I hope I live.
Some 30 minutes later, somewhere above the Pentagon on American Airlines Flight 77, Barbara Olson calls her husband Ted and tells him hijackers have taken over.
She told me that she had been herded to the back of the plane. She mentioned that they had used knives and box cutters to hijack the plane. I had to tell her about the 2 airplanes that had hit the World Trade Center. Why? I just felt that I had to.
On United Flight 93 over Pennsylvania, Thomas Burnett calls his wife.
And he said that somebody was already dead, that they had stabbed somebody, and that they were all going to die, and that they were going to try to do something.
Mark Bingham calls his mother in the midst of chaos.
He said, "I just want to let you know that I love you all. There are 3 men on board who have taken over the aircraft, and they say they have a bomb." And at that point, we were cut off. He wasn't able to say anything else.
Moments later, the plane went down, and families forever lost their chance to talk with one another.
Some family members will take comfort in the fact that they were able to say their goodbyes, that they were able to express certain feelings that they have, such as "I love you."
Annalisa Van Kirk is a medical social worker who deals with trauma.
That they were able to communicate with the people in their lives that were important to them, and that we can take comfort from.
One of the last things Melissa Hughes did on September 11th is call her husband Sean.
"Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. A plane hit the building or a bomb went off, we don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and we just wanted you to know that I love you always."
Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
Really heart-wrenching stuff.
I can't imagine putting down the phone after a call like that.
Our coverage continues next hour with guests and correspondents live from around the globe.
We'll leave you now with some haunting images from a week that saw too many.
This is a terrible moment, but this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.